Hey guys, tonight we journey back to the sun-drenched banks of the Nile, to a civilization that built pyramids and worshipped cats, but also had a surprisingly modern take on matters of the heart.
We're going to explore something you might think.
You know all about, but trust me, what no one tells you about ancient Egyptian weddings is a tale far richer, stranger, and perhaps more relatable than you'd ever imagine. Forget the Hollywood epics.
This isn't about grand ceremonies or dramatic declarations.
This is about the quiet realities of love, partnership, and family in a world thousands of years removed from our own. You're about to step into the dusty
Sandals of an ancient Egyptian, navigating the complexities of commitment in a land ruled by pharaohs and gods.
and let's be honest, you probably won't survive this journey without at least one moment of genuine surprise. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together, daughter, as you close your eyes, and let the soft hum of the fan transport you. You find yourself standing on the fertile banks of the
Nile, the lifeblood of ancient Egypt. The air is warm, carrying the scent of blooming papyrus and distant cooking fires. Around you, life bustles with an ancient rhythm. Yet beneath the surface, the universal currents of human connection flow.
just as they do today.
You're here to understand how love and marriage blossomed in this extraordinary civilization. A blossoming that often defied the rigid expectations we might impose from our modern perspective.
It wasn't always about grand romantic gestures or,
Elaborate proposals.
sometimes it was about practicality, family, and the quiet understanding that grew between two people sharing a life. Mainstream historical fact. In ancient Egypt, marriage was primarily a social and economic arrangement, often orchestrated by families to ensure communal stability and personal advancement. However, this pragmatic approach did not preclude the presence of romantic love. Evidence from love poems, songs, and personal letters suggests that deep affection and emotional bonds were highly valued within marital relationships.
It was a blend of practicality and passion, a partnership designed for both societal function and personal fulfillment.
Imagine your parents setting you up with someone, but then you actually fall head over heels in love with them. That was often the Egyptian reality. One quirky tidbit about ancient Egyptian relationships is the frequent use of affectionate
Terms like brother and sister between spouses, even when they weren't related.
This wasn't some weird family dynamic. It was actually a sign of deep intimacy and equality.
Calling your spouse your sister or brother implied that you saw them as your equal, your closest companion, someone who shared your blood in spirit, if not in fact. It's like the ancient Egyptian version of calling someone your ride or die, but with more hieroglyphs and significantly better eyeliner.
This terminology appears frequently in love poetry and personal correspondence, suggesting that the ideal
Marriage was one of companionship and mutual respect, not just romantic passion or economic convenience. You walk through the bustling streets of Memphis or Thebes, observing the daily rhythms of Egyptian life.
Here, you notice something remarkable. Women moving freely through the markets, conducting business, owning property, and engaging in conversations with men who aren't their husbands or fathers. This isn't the restricted, veiled existence you
Might expect from an ancient civilization. Egyptian women enjoyed a level of independence and legal equality that wouldn't be matched in many parts of the world for thousands of years. They could own land, run businesses, initiate divorce proceedings,
and even serve as pharaohs in their own right.
This freedom extended into their romantic lives as well, where they had considerably more say in their choice of partner than their contemporaries in other ancient civilizations. The concept of romantic love wasn't foreign to the ancient Egyptians.
In fact, it was celebrated and cherished. Love poetry from the New Kingdom period reveals a sophisticated understanding of romantic emotion, with verses that could easily fit into a modern love song. These poems speak of longing, desire, physical
Attraction, and the joy of being with one's beloved.
They describe lovers meeting in gardens, exchanging gifts, and expressing their devotion in language that's surprisingly contemporary. One famous poem describes a young man's heart racing when he sees his beloved, his hands trembling, his thoughts scattered emotions that anyone who's ever been in love would recognize instantly. Historians still argue whether they're romantic, Ideals expressed in Egyptian love poetry reflected the reality of most marriages or represented an aspirational ideal reserved for the elite. Some scholars suggest that the prevalence of love poetry indicates that romantic love was indeed a common
experience and expectation in Egyptian marriages.
Others argue that these poems were literary exercises, perhaps composed for entertainment rather than as reflections of actual relationships. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, with romantic love being valued and pursued, but not always achieved, much like today.
What's clear is that the Egyptians understood and appreciated the power of romantic attraction, even if practical considerations often took precedence in marriage arrangements. As you continue your exploration of this ancient world, you begin to understand that Egyptian attitudes toward love and marriage were far more nuanced and sophisticated than you might have expected. They recognized that a successful marriage required both practical compatibility and emotional connection. They understood that love could grow over time, that partnership was as important as passion, and that mutual respect formed the foundation of a lasting union.
These weren't naive romantics or cold calculators.
They were people who understood
the complex interplay between heart and mind, between individual desire and social responsibility.
And as the sun sets over the Nile, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, you realize that perhaps the ancient Egyptians understood love
better than we give them credit for.
Having glimpsed the surprising depth of love and partnership in ancient Egypt, you might be wondering, how did it all begin?
What were the steps that led a couple from initial attraction to a lifelong commitment? Forget the elaborate proposals and diamond rings of today. The path to marriage in ancient Egypt was paved with different customs, ones that were often more about family, negotiation, and a very practical understanding of what it meant to build a life together. It was a process that, while lacking a single grand ceremony, was rich in its own unique rituals and traditions. Imagine you're a young Egyptian, perhaps a craftsman or a farmer, and you've set your sights on someone.
Or more likely, your parents have. While personal choice certainly played a role, especially as you saw in the love poetry, many marriages were still arranged, or at least facilitated, by families.
This wasn't necessarily a cold, loveless transaction.
It was a pragmatic approach
to ensuring social stability and economic security. Your family would approach the family of your intended, and discussions would begin.
These weren't just casual chats.
They were serious negotiations, often involving gifts and agreements that
laid the groundwork for the future union.
It's like a business merger, but with significantly more emotional investment and a higher chance of awkward family dinners. Mainstream historical fact, in ancient Egypt, the process leading to marriage often involved a period of negotiation
and agreement between the families of the prospective bride and groom.
This informal betrothal period focused on establishing financial arrangements and mutual responsibilities, rather than a formal engagement ceremony with rings or public declarations. The primary goal was to ensure the economic stability and social standing of the new household, reflecting the highly practical nature of Egyptian society. One of the most significant aspects of this pre-marital phase was the exchange of gifts,
which served as a tangible demonstration of commitment and a form of financial security for the bride.
The groom, or his family, would typically provide gifts to the bride's family, often referred to as the mahr or bride price, though it wasn't a purchase of the bride herself, but rather a compensation for her family for the loss of her labor and to ensure her well-being.
The bride, in turn, would bring her own dowry into the marriage, consisting of household goods, clothing, and sometimes even land or slaves. This wasn't just about shiny objects.
It was about establishing a shared economic foundation for the
new couple. It's like a very early version of a prenuptial agreement, but instead of lawyers, you had proud parents and a lot of valuable linen.
And probably less arguing about who gets the dog. This exchange of gifts and property was crucial because, as you'll soon discover, there wasn't a single, universally recognized wedding ceremony in ancient Egypt as we understand it today.
The legal and social recognition of a marriage largely hinged on these agreements and the subsequent act of the bride moving into the groom's house.
So, these betrothal customs, these negotiations and gift exchanges were far more significant than a modern engagement party. They were the real binding elements, the promises made before witnesses that solidified the intent to marry.
It was a verbal contract, often later formalized in writing, that carried immense weight in their society. Historians still argue whether the absence of a formal Public wedding ceremony in ancient Egypt indicates a lesser emphasis on the institution of marriage itself, or if it simply reflects a different cultural understanding of how unions were recognized.
Some scholars suggest that the focus on private agreements and the act of cohabitation meant that marriage was viewed more as a private
contract between individuals and families rather than a public religious sacrament. Others contend that the societal recognition and the various rituals surrounding the union, even if not a single ceremony, were just as binding and significant as any public wedding. It's a bit like debating whether a common law marriage is less of a marriage than one with a big white dress.
The answer, for the Egyptians, was probably a resounding no, as long as the terms were clear and the families were on board. Beyond the practicalities, there were also more personal,
symbolic gestures.
While there wasn't a universal tradition of engagement rings, some evidence suggests that couples might exchange simple rings or other personal tokens as a sign of their commitment. These weren't necessarily worn on a specific finger, or even continuously, but they served as private symbols of affection and promise.
Imagine a young couple, perhaps by the Nile at sunset, exchanging small, carved amulets or simple bands of gold or silver, whispering promises to each other. It's a quiet moment, but no less powerful than a grand proposal under a spotlight.
It's a reminder that even in a highly structured society, personal romance found its own subtle expressions. The age at which Egyptians married also played a role in these betrothal customs.
Early marriage was common, particularly for women, who might be married as young as 12 or 14. Men typically married a few years later, perhaps around 18 to 20.
This meant that many of these pre-marital negotiations would have involved parents
making decisions for their children, though the children's consent was still generally sought.
It wasn't a forced union, but a guided one, where the wisdom of elders helped navigate the complexities of family alliances and economic futures. It's a far cry from swiping right on a dating app, isn't it? Though, to be fair, the success
rate might have been higher. As you observe these ancient Egyptian betrothal customs, you realize that they were a carefully constructed prelude to marriage, a series of steps designed to ensure stability, prosperity, and a clear understanding of responsibilities. It wasn't about a single dramatic moment, but a gradual unfolding of commitment, built on a foundation of family agreement and mutual benefit. These were the quiet promises, the unspoken understandings, and the tangible exchanges that truly set the stage for a lifelong partnership. And as the sun begins to climb higher over the desert, casting long shadows across the bustling marketplace, you're left with a profound appreciation for the practical wisdom of a people who understood that a strong marriage was built not just
on love, but on a solid foundation of shared resources and clear expectations. Now that you understand the intricate dance of betrothal and negotiation that preceded a union in ancient Egypt, prepare yourself for perhaps the most surprising revelation of all. There was no single, grand, elaborate wedding ceremony as we understand it today. No procession down an aisle. No exchange of vows before a priest. No cutting of a multi-tiered cake.
The concept of a formal, public ritual to solemnize a marriage simply didn't exist in the way it does in many cultures, both ancient and modern.
This might seem utterly bizarre to you, accustomed as you are to white dresses and wedding bells. But for the Egyptians, marriage was a far more pragmatic and perhaps more intimate affair. Imagine you've just completed the negotiations. The families have agreed, the gifts have been exchanged, and the terms are set. What happens next? The wedding itself was, in essence, the act of the bride moving her belongings into the groom's house. That's it.
No fanfare, no official pronouncements, no religious blessings.
The marriage was considered legally and socially binding the moment the woman entered the man's home with her possessions.
It was a private affair, witnessed by family and friends, but lacking the pomp and circumstance that defines weddings.
In so many other societies,
it's like moving in with your partner today and calling it a wedding. Efficient, no frills approach to matrimony.
And probably a lot less stressful than planning a modern wedding. Wouldn't you agree? Mainstream. Historical fact. In ancient Egypt, there was no formal, state or religiously sanctioned wedding ceremony.
A couple was considered married once they began cohabiting, typically marked by the bride moving her possessions into the groom's house. The legal and social recognition of the union stemmed from nuptial agreements and the public acknowledgement of their shared household, rather than a specific ritual or ceremony. One quirky tidbit about this lack of a formal ceremony is that it highlights the highly secular nature of ancient Egyptian marriage. Unlike many other ancient cultures where marriage was deeply intertwined with religious rites and divine blessings, Egyptian marriage was primarily a civil contract.
It was a matter of family, property, and procreation, not a sacrament. This meant that priests played no role in officiating marriages, and there were no specific temples dedicated to marital rites.
It's like a modern civil ceremony, but without the courthouse or the justice of the peace.
This emphasis on the secular allowed for a flexibility and practicality that might surprise you, given the Egyptians' deep religiosity in other aspects
of their lives. It's almost as if they said, look, the gods have bigger things to worry about than who's moving in with whom.
Just make sure you're fruitful and multiply, and keep the offerings coming. Historians still argue whether the absence of a formal wedding ceremony implies a lesser importance placed on marriage in ancient Egyptian society, or if it simply reflects a different cultural understanding of the institution.
Some scholars suggest that because there was no grand public display, marriage might have been viewed as a less significant life event compared to, say, a funeral or a religious festival.
Others contend that the very practicality and civil nature of marriage made it a more fundamental and integrated part of daily life, so deeply ingrained that it didn't require a separate, elaborate ritual.
It's a bit like debating whether
breathing is less important because you don't have a ceremony for it every day. The truth is, marriage was incredibly important, but its formalization was simply handled differently. So, you witness the young woman, perhaps named Nefertari, carefully carrying her linen chests and a small, carved wooden box into the house
of her new husband, Amenhotep. Her family helps her, their faces beaming with quiet pride.
There are no trumpets, no cheering crowds, no elaborate decorations, just the simple, profound act of two lives merging, of a new household being established. This was the moment, this was the wedding.
It was a testament to the Egyptian belief that the true essence of marriage lay not in a fleeting ceremony, but in the daily commitment, the shared responsibilities, and the creation of a new family unit.
It was a quiet revolution in marital
customs, one that prioritized substance over spectacle. Another light joke. You know, I bet ancient Egyptian wedding planners had it pretty easy. Their main job was probably just to make sure the moving truck showed up on time.
Did the papyrus scrolls get here? Great.
Did the linen chests arrive?
Perfect. Okay, you're married.
Next.
It certainly cuts down on the stress of seating, charts and floral arrangements, doesn't it? Though, I imagine the arguments over who gets the good clay pots were probably legendary. The simplicity of the marriage formalization also meant that it was accessible to everyone, regardless of social status. Whether you were a pharaoh or a farmer, the basic act of marriage was the same, an agreement followed by cohabitation.
This egalitarian approach to marriage contrasts sharply with many other ancient societies where elaborate ceremonies were often
reserved for the elite, reinforcing social hierarchies.
In Egypt, the focus was on the legal and social recognition of the union, which was achieved through practical steps rather than ceremonial display. It was a system that valued the outcome, a stable household, and new generations more than the process. As the sun sets, casting long shadows across the newly joined household, you reflect on this unique approach to marriage.
It wasn't
about a single dramatic event, but a gradual, organic process of becoming a family. The absence of a grand ceremony didn't diminish the significance of the union.
It simply shifted the emphasis to the daily realities of married life.
It was a testament to a culture that understood that true commitment was built not on fleeting moments of spectacle, but on the enduring foundation of shared lives, shared responsibilities, and the quiet, steady rhythm of home.
And as the stars begin to twinkle over the Nile,
you realize that perhaps, in their simplicity, the ancient Egyptians found a profound truth about the nature of lasting love. So, if there was no grand ceremony, no priest, and no official pronouncement,
what truly bound a couple in ancient Egypt? The answer, surprisingly modern in its practicality, lies in the legal documents, the marriage contract. This wasn't a romantic scroll filled with declarations of undying love, but a pragmatic papyrus detailing property, responsibilities, and rights. It was the bedrock of their unions, ensuring stability and clarity in a society where family and economic well-being were paramount.
You are about to discover that the ancient Egyptians were masters of legal foresight. laying down the terms of a partnership long before the first linen chest crossed the threshold. Imagine a scribe, perhaps in a bustling administrative office, meticulously writing on a papyrus scroll.
This isn't a love letter. It's a marriage contract, often drawn up by the bride's father or legal representative, and then signed by the groom and witnesses.
These documents, written in hieratic or demotic script, were far from poetic. They were precise, detailing the financial arrangements, the responsibilities of the husband to provide for his wife, and crucially, the wife's rights to her own property.
It was a formal, legally binding agreement that protected both parties, but especially the woman, in a way that was remarkably progressive for the ancient world.
It's like a prenuptial agreement, but instead of being a sign of distrust, it was a standard, sensible part of getting married.
And probably a lot less contentious than some modern prenups. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptian marriages
were formalized through legal contracts, often written on papyrus, which primarily focused on economic matters, outlining the financial responsibilities of the husband towards his wife and protecting the wife's property rights.
These contracts ensured that women maintained control over their marital assets and stipulated provisions for their support in case of divorce, highlighting the legal equality enjoyed by Egyptian women within marriage. One quirky tidbit about
these contracts is that they often included clauses detailing the husband's annual responsibility to provide food and clothing for his wife.
This wasn't just a vague promise, it was a legally enforceable obligation.
Imagine if your marriage certificate stipulated how many loaves of bread and tunics your spouse had to provide each year.
It underscores the practical, sustenance-focused nature of these unions.
It also reveals a society where a woman's economic security was a primary concern, and the husband's role as provider was clearly defined and legally mandated.
It's a far cry from the modern notion of love will find a way, and more like love will find a way, but also make sure there's enough grain in the granary. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on economic clauses in these contracts indicates a lack of romantic sentiment in Egyptian marriages, or if it simply reflects the pragmatic nature of a society where legal documents primarily served
to regulate property and financial matters.
Some scholars suggest that the contracts, by focusing on material provisions, imply that love was secondary to economic stability.
Others contend that the very existence of such protective clauses for women allowed for greater freedom in choosing a partner based on affection, as their financial well-being was already secured.
It's a bit like debating whether a detailed job contract means you don't love your job, or if it just means you're smart about your future.
The truth is, both love and practicality could, and often did, coexist. These contracts were not
just about the husband's obligations.
They also meticulously outlined the wife's rights.
Crucially, a woman in ancient Egypt retained full control over any property she owned before marriage. This meant that her dowry, or any inheritance she received, remained hers, even after she married. This was a stark contrast to many other ancient societies where a woman's property often became her husband's upon marriage.
In Egypt, a wife
could buy, sell, and inherit property independently of her husband. She could even represent herself in court. This level of legal autonomy for women was truly exceptional and speaks volumes about their status within Egyptian society. It's
like having your own separate bank account, but for your entire life's assets, and your husband can't touch it.
Pretty revolutionary for 3,000 years ago, right? Another light joke. You know, I bet ancient Egyptian divorce lawyers had a pretty easy time. Your Honor, the contract clearly states he was supposed to provide 10 measures of barley and 5 linen
tunics annually.
He only provided 8 measures and 3 tunics.
My client demands her share of the conjugal property.
It's all about the papyrus trail, isn't it? No messy emotional arguments, just cold, hard facts. Though, I imagine the arguments over who gets the good clay pots were probably still legendary. The marriage contract also stipulated provisions for divorce, ensuring that the wife would not be left destitute.
If a divorce occurred, the husband was often required to return the wife's dowry and provide her with a certain amount of support.
This legal protection made divorce a viable option for women, contributing to the relatively high rates of divorce in ancient Egypt compared to
other ancient cultures.
It wasn't a shameful secret.
It was a recognized part of life, and the legal framework was in place to manage it fairly.
It's a testament to a society that understood that not all unions last forever, and that both parties deserved a fair shake when they ended. So, As you examine these ancient papyrus contracts, you realize that they were far more than just dry
legal documents.
They were a reflection of a society that valued order, fairness, and the protection of its citizens, especially its women.
They ensured that marriage, while a personal union, was also a stable and equitable partnership built
On clear terms and mutual responsibilities,
these contracts, rather than diminishing the emotional aspect of marriage, perhaps even allowed it to flourish by removing many of the financial anxieties that plagued couples in other cultures. And as the ink fades on these ancient scrolls, you're left with a profound appreciation for the legal wisdom of a people who understood that a strong marriage, like a strong society, is built on a foundation of clear rights and responsibilities. So, you've seen that ancient Egyptian marriages weren't formalized by grand ceremonies or religious rites, but by practical contracts. Now, let's get to the moment that truly sealed the deal, the simple yet profoundly significant act that marked the official beginning of a new household, the bride moving into her husband's house. This wasn't just a change of address, it was the public declaration, the visual confirmation that a new union had been forged, a new family unit established.
You're about to witness the quiet power of this domestic transition, a moment that,
for the Egyptians, was more binding than any elaborate ritual. Imagine the scene. The sun is high over a modest Egyptian home, perhaps a mud brick dwelling with a flat roof, surrounded by a small garden.
The air is filled with the sounds of daily life, the distant lowing of cattle, the chatter of neighbors, the rhythmic thud of a pestle in a mortar.
A young woman, perhaps the Nefertari you met earlier, stands at the threshold of her family home, her possessions gathered around her. These aren't just personal items, they are her dowry, the goods she brings into the marriage, carefully itemized in the contract you just learned about. Her family, perhaps a little teary-eyed but mostly beaming with pride, helps her carry
her linen chests, her cosmetic jars, her cooking utensils, and perhaps a small, carved wooden statue of a protective deity. This isn't a hurried departure. It's a procession, albeit a small, intimate one, from one family unit to another.
It's like moving day, but with far more emotional weight and the understanding that this is a one-way trip into a new life. Mainstream historical fact. In ancient
Egypt, the act of marriage was primarily recognized by the bride moving her belongings into the groom's house and the couple beginning to cohabit. This physical transition, often accompanied by the transfer of the bride's dowry, served as the de facto public declaration of the union, solidifying the marriage in the eyes of the community and legally establishing the new household. One quirky
tidbit about this domestic transition is that the bride's possessions were often quite substantial, reflecting her family's wealth and her own legal standing. These weren't just trinkets. They could include furniture, clothing, jewelry, and even slaves or livestock, all of which remained her personal property, as stipulated in the marriage contract.
Imagine the logistical challenge of moving all that without a modern moving company.
It underscores the importance of the dowry as a form of financial security for the woman, ensuring her independence within the marriage. It's like bringing your entire apartment with you when you move in with your partner, and legally, it all
stays yours. Pretty smart, right? Historians still argue whether the simplicity of the act of moving in as the primary marker of marriage indicates a lack of emotional significance, or if it highlights a deeper, more practical understanding of partnership. Some scholars suggest that the absence of elaborate ceremonies meant that the emotional bond was less emphasized than the economic and social aspects.
Others contend that the very intimacy of the domestic transition, witnessed by close family and friends, made it profoundly meaningful, focusing on the daily realities of shared life rather than a fleeting spectacle. It's a bit like debating whether a handwritten letter is less significant than a grand public speech. The truth is, for the Egyptians, the quiet act of building a home together was the most powerful declaration of all. As the bride crosses the threshold, she is not just entering a new house, she is entering a new life, a new social status. She is no longer solely a daughter of her father's house. She is now the mistress of her own, or at least mistress with her husband.
This transition was often accompanied by small, informal celebrations within the family, perhaps a shared meal, some music, or simple blessings from elders.
These weren't public festivals, but intimate gatherings that acknowledged the new union and welcomed the bride into her new role. It was a moment of quiet joy, a sigh of relief that the negotiations were over, and the real work of building a life could begin. It's like the after party of a wedding, but it's the main event, another light joke. You know, I bet the ancient Egyptian equivalent of a wedding registry was just a list of all the things the bride was bringing with her.
Oh, look, she's got 3 linen tunics, a good grinding stone, and a slightly chipped beer jar. What a catch! And the groom's family would probably be like, excellent. More storage space for our grain. Very practical people. Those Egyptians, the symbolism of the bride entering the groom's house was profound.
It represented the merging of 2 families, the creation of a new economic unit, and the continuation of the lineage.
The house itself
was a central element of Egyptian life, a place of refuge, family, and daily existence.
By entering it as a wife, the woman was taking on a fundamental role in the perpetuation of society. This act, simple as it was, carried the weight of tradition, community expectation, and the hopes for future generations. It was a powerful, unspoken vow, enacted through the very fabric of their daily lives. This domestic focus also meant that marriage was deeply integrated into the rhythm of everyday life. There was no need to disrupt the agricultural cycle or the work of the artisans for a grand ceremony. The transition was seamless, a natural progression from courtship and betrothal to shared living. This practicality allowed for early marriages,
which were common, as young couples could establish their households without the burden of elaborate wedding expenses.
It was a system designed for efficiency and stability, ensuring that the population continued to grow and the workforce remained robust. It's a far cry from saving up for years just to afford a down payment on a wedding venue, isn't it?
1.
More light joke. I imagine the ancient Egyptian version of a wedding photographer was just a scribe sketching the bride's linen chests as they were carried in. Yes, yes. Capture the texture of that fine Egyptian cotton. This will be a masterpiece
for the ages.
And then the couple would probably frame it and hang it proudly in their new home. Very avant-garde for the time. So, as you observe this quiet yet momentous transition, you realize that the ancient Egyptians had a profound understanding of what truly constituted a marriage. It wasn't about the fleeting spectacle of a ceremony,
but about the enduring reality of shared space, shared resources, and shared lives.
The act of the bride moving into her husband's house was the ultimate declaration,
a testament to their belief that a union was built day by day, within the walls of a home, through the quiet rhythm of cohabitation, and as the sun sets, casting
long shadows across the newly joined household, you're left with a profound appreciation for the practical wisdom of a people who understood that the true essence of marriage lay not in a grand public display, but in the intimate, everyday act of building a life together. So, you've witnessed the quiet, domestic act that formalized an ancient Egyptian marriage, the bride moving into her husband's house. But don't let the lack of a grand ceremony fool you into thinking there was no celebration.
Once the practicalities were handled, once the linen chests were unpacked and the household goods arranged, it was time for the joyous feasting and festivities that truly marked a union. These weren't public spectacles for all of Egypt to see,
but intimate, vibrant gatherings filled with music, food, and the heartfelt good wishes of family and friends.
You're about to step into the heart of an Egyptian celebration, where the air hums with joy and the senses are delightfully overwhelmed. Imagine the courtyard of the newly formed household, transformed for the occasion.
Strings of fragrant flowers,
perhaps lotus blossoms or jasmine, are draped across doorways, their sweet scent mingling with the aroma of roasting duck and freshly baked bread.
Musicians play on harps, lutes, and double clarinets, their melodies weaving through the chatter and laughter of the guests.
You see family members, dressed in their finest linen garments, their eyes sparkling with happiness.
Children adorned
with floral garlands chase each other playfully, their giggles adding to the festive din.
This is a celebration of life, of new beginnings, and of the enduring strength of family bonds.
It's like a backyard barbecue, but with more ancient
instruments, better weather, and significantly less chance of someone burning the hot dogs, and probably better dancing.
Mainstream historical fact. While ancient Egyptian marriages lacked a formal public ceremony, the union was often celebrated with private feasts and gatherings held at the homes of the families involved.
These festivities typically included music,
dancing, abundant food and drink, and the exchange of gifts, serving as a joyous affirmation of the new couple's union within their social circle.
These celebrations were crucial for reinforcing community ties and publicly acknowledging the new household. One quirky tidbit about these feasts is the sheer variety and abundance of food.
The Egyptians were renowned for their culinary skills, and a wedding feast would have been a showcase of their bounty. You'd find roasted meats, beef, goat, poultry, and fish from the Nile alongside a dizzying array of breads, cakes sweetened with honey and dates, and fresh fruits like figs, grapes, and pomegranates.
And of course, there would be plenty of beer and wine, flowing freely to lubricate conversation and encourage merriment.
Imagine a buffet spread that would make a modern caterer weep with envy, all prepared without the aid of refrigeration or modern ovens.
It's a testament to their agricultural prowess and their dedication to hospitality. You might even see a guest trying to sneak a few extra dates into their tunic for later, because who could resist such a spread? Historians still argue whether
the scale and extravagance of these private feasts varied significantly based on social class, or if even modest families strove to provide a lavish celebration within their means.
Some scholars suggest that while the elite undoubtedly had grander affairs, the fundamental elements of music, food, and communal joy were present across all social strata, reflecting a shared cultural value placed on celebration.
Others contend that the economic realities would have dictated much simpler gatherings for the majority of the population, with elaborate feasts being a privilege of the wealthy.
It's a bit like debating whether everyone throws a huge party for their birthday,
or if some people just have a quiet dinner.
The truth is likely a spectrum, with everyone doing their best to celebrate in a way that honored the couple and their families. As the evening progresses, the music grows livelier, and the dancing begins. You see guests, both men and women, moving to the rhythm of the drums and flutes, their bodies swaying gracefully. This isn't choreographed ballroom dancing.
It's spontaneous, joyful movement, an expression of collective happiness.
Some might perform acrobatic feats, while others engage in more sedate, ritualistic dances. The air is filled with laughter and shouts of encouragement.
It's a time for letting loose, for shedding the worries of daily life, and for simply reveling
in the moment.
It's like a wedding reception where everyone actually wants to dance, and no one's checking their phone.
A truly utopian vision, wouldn't you agree? Another light joke. You know, I bet the ancient Egyptian equivalent of a
wedding DJ was just a really enthusiastic guy with a drum and a very strong set of lungs.
All right, everybody, get ready for the walk like an Egyptian dance. No, not that one. The actual walk like an Egyptian dance. It involves more arm movements and less pointing.
And then everyone would politely pretend to understand, while secretly just doing their own thing beyond the food and entertainment. These festivities also served an important social function.
They were an opportunity for the two families to formally mingle, to strengthen their new ties, and for the community to witness and acknowledge the new union. Gifts would be exchanged, not just between the bride and groom, but also between the families, further solidifying their alliance.
It was a time for gossip, for matchmaking for other eligible singles, and for reinforcing the intricate web of relationships that held Egyptian society together. It was a powerful act of communal affirmation, a public declaration of support for
the newly formed household. The celebrations could last for several days, depending on the wealth and status of the families involved.
During this time, the new couple would be the center of attention, showered with blessings and good wishes.
It was a period of transition, allowing them to ease into their new roles and responsibilities within the comfort and support of their extended families. This extended period of festivity, even if informal, provided a vital social cushion for the young couple, helping them to integrate into their new life together. It's a far cry from a quick ceremony and then after the honeymoon. This was a gradual immersion into married life, surrounded by loved ones. So, as the last notes of the music fade and the stars begin to pepper the Egyptian sky, you're left
with a profound sense of the warmth and joy that permeated these ancient wedding festivities.
They may not have had the grand ceremonies we associate with weddings today, but they certainly knew how to celebrate. The focus was on community, on
family, and on the simple yet profound act of sharing good food, good music, and good company.
It was a testament to a culture that understood that the true essence of a union lies not in a single, fleeting moment, but in the enduring bonds of love and friendship, affirmed through shared celebration. And as you drift off, you can almost
still hear the faint echoes of ancient Egyptian laughter, a timeless melody of joy and new beginnings. You've witnessed the quiet domesticity of an Egyptian wedding and the joyous feasting that followed.
Now,
let's delve into a truly remarkable aspect of ancient Egyptian society that profoundly shaped their marital landscape: the surprising equality and independence Egyptian women enjoyed, particularly within the confines of marriage. Forget the veiled, sequestered women of many other ancient cultures. In Egypt, women were not just partners, but legal equals, with rights and freedoms that would be enviable even in some parts of the modern world. You're about to discover a society where women truly stood on their own 2 feet, even when walking hand in hand with their husbands. Imagine yourself in a bustling Egyptian marketplace. You see women, not just as shoppers, but as vendors, selling their wares, negotiating prices, and managing their own businesses. You might even spot a woman representing herself in a legal dispute before a scribe, confidently stating her case.
This wasn't an anomaly, it was the norm. Ancient Egyptian women, regardless of their social status, possessed legal rights that were virtually identical to those of men. They could own, inherit, and dispose of property independently. They could enter into contracts, initiate lawsuits, and even serve as witnesses in court.
This fundamental equality extended directly into their marriages, giving them a powerful position within the household and beyond. It's like a society where every woman had her own independent bank account and a legal team on speed dial. But thousands of years ago.
Pretty revolutionary, right? Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptian women enjoyed a remarkable degree
of legal and economic independence compared to women in many other ancient civilizations.
They had the right to own, inherit, and manage property, conduct business, and represent themselves in legal proceedings.
These rights were maintained within marriage, meaning a wife's assets remained her own, and she could act independently
in financial and legal matters,
even without her husband's consent. One quirky tidbit that highlights this independence is the fact that women could initiate divorce proceedings.
It wasn't just a right reserved for men.
If a woman felt her marriage was no longer working, she could petition for a divorce, and the legal system would recognize her claim. This wasn't a shameful act. It was a recognized part of life, and
the legal framework was in place to manage it fairly, as you saw with the marriage contracts. Imagine the power dynamic this created within a marriage. It meant that a husband couldn't simply take his wife for granted, knowing that she had the legal means to leave if she was mistreated or if the partnership failed.
It's like having an escape clause built right into the relationship, but without the need for a secret handshake or a hidden key.
Very empowering, wouldn't you agree? Historians still argue whether the legal equality of women in ancient Egypt translated into true social equality in daily life, or if there were still informal societal pressures and expectations that limited their roles. Some scholars suggest that while women had extensive legal rights on paper, societal norms and traditional gender roles might have still confined many to domestic spheres.
Others contend that the legal framework empowered women to actively participate in public life and pursue various professions, leading to a more genuinely egalitarian society than previously thought.
It's a bit like debating whether having the right to vote automatically means everyone has equal political power.
The truth is likely a complex interplay, with legal rights providing the foundation and individual circumstances and societal attitudes shaping the reality within the marriage. This independence meant that a wife was not merely an extension of her husband.
She retained control over her dowry and any property she acquired during the marriage. This was often formalized in the marriage contracts, which meticulously outlined what belonged to whom.
If a husband wanted to use his wife's property, he often needed her explicit permission.
This level of financial autonomy meant that women were not economically dependent on their husbands, which in turn gave them significant leverage within the relationship.
It's like having your own separate bank account, but for your entire life's assets, and your husband can't touch it.
Pretty revolutionary for 3,000 years ago, right? Another light joke. You know, I bet ancient Egyptian husbands had to be extra careful with their jokes.
Honey, did you see my new papyrus scroll? It's a list of all the things I own that you don't. And then the wife would just calmly pull out her own papyrus scroll, which was probably twice as long, and say, "Oh, that's cute.
Here's mine." And then the husband would probably just go back to carving hieroglyphs very quietly. This independence also extended to their social lives. Women were not confined to the home.
They could attend public festivals, visit friends, and participate
in religious ceremonies.
They were visible and active members of society, contributing to the cultural and economic life of their communities. This freedom of movement and association meant that women had a broader social network and a greater sense of agency in their daily lives, which undoubtedly influenced their relationships and their choices in marriage.
It's a far cry from societies where women were expected to remain largely unseen and unheard outside the domestic sphere. The unique position of women in ancient Egypt also influenced the way marriages were viewed. While procreation and the continuation of the family line were important, the emphasis was also heavily placed on companionship and mutual respect. The affectionate terms like brother and sister used between spouses, which you heard about earlier, underscore this ideal of partnership. It was a relationship built on shared life, shared responsibilities, and a deep understanding of each other's roles and contributions. This wasn't just a legal arrangement, it was a partnership of equals, working together to build a prosperous
household and a fulfilling life. As you observe the confident stride of an Egyptian woman, managing her affairs, engaging in conversation, and standing as an equal alongside her husband, you realize that the ancient Egyptians had a remarkably progressive vision of gender roles within marriage. It was a society that recognized the inherent worth and capabilities of women, empowering them with legal rights and social freedoms that were centuries ahead of their time. This wasn't just a historical anomaly, it was a testament to a culture
that understood that a strong society and strong marriages are built on the foundation of equality and mutual respect.
And as the sun sets over the Nile, casting long shadows across the land, you're left with a profound appreciation for the enduring legacy of Egyptian women, who, even in ancient times, showed the world what true partnership could look like. You've
just marveled at the surprising independence of Egyptian women within marriage, their ability to own property, conduct business, and even initiate legal proceedings.
This leads us naturally to another fascinating, and perhaps even more surprising, aspect of ancient Egyptian marital life: the relatively straightforward process of divorce. Unlike many other ancient societies where divorce was difficult, shameful, or even impossible for women in Egypt, it was a recognized and accessible option for both spouses. You're about to discover a society that understood that not all unions last forever, and that a fair exit was as important as a fair entry. Imagine a couple, perhaps the Nefertari and Amenhotep you've been following, who, despite their initial
hopes, find their marriage is no longer working.
Perhaps they've grown apart, or irreconcilable differences have emerged.
In many other ancient cultures, this might lead to a lifetime of quiet misery, especially for the woman. But in Egypt, the path to separation was remarkably clear. There was no need for lengthy court battles, no public shaming, and no religious condemnation. The process was largely a private affair, often involving a simple declaration of intent to separate, followed by the formal dissolution of the marriage contract.
It's like a modern no-fault divorce, but without the piles of paperwork and the exorbitant legal fees.
And probably a lot less drama, at least in the legal sense. Mainstream historical fact: divorce in ancient Egypt was a relatively simple and accessible process for both men and women, with no social stigma attached to it. It was primarily a civil
matter, formalized by the dissolution of the marriage contract.
The legal framework ensured that women, in particular, were protected financially, often receiving back their dowry and a portion of the marital property,
as stipulated in the original marriage agreement. One quirky tidbit about Egyptian divorce is that the reason for separation didn't necessarily have to be a grand transgression.
It could be something as simple as incompatibility or a desire
to move on. There was no concept of fault in the way many later legal systems would define it. This meant that couples could part ways amicably, or at least without the need for public accusations and recriminations.
Imagine if every breakup was just a polite, "It's not you, it's me, and here's your dowry back." It certainly simplifies things, doesn't it? This pragmatic approach reflects a society that prioritized stability and order, even in the face of personal unhappiness. By providing clear mechanisms for dissolving unions that no longer serve their purpose, historians still argue whether the ease of divorce in ancient Egypt led to higher rates of marital dissolution compared to other ancient societies, or if it simply made the process more transparent and less fraught with social consequences. Some scholars suggest that the lack of stigma and the financial protections for women encouraged more frequent divorces. Others contend that while the option was available, most Egyptians still valued lifelong partnerships, and divorce was not a casual decision. It's a bit like debating whether having an easy exit ramp on a highway encourages more people to leave, or if it just makes the journey smoother for those who need to. The truth is likely a complex interplay, with the legal framework providing the possibility, and individual circumstances and societal values shaping the reality. The financial implications of divorce were meticulously laid out in the marriage contracts, which you remember from our last discussion.
If a divorce occurred, the husband was typically required to return the wife's dowry, which she had brought into the marriage.
In addition, the wife was often entitled to a portion of the marital property accumulated during the union, sometimes
as much as 1/3.
This ensured that women were not left destitute after a divorce, providing them with economic security and the means to support themselves and any children. This was a radical concept for the ancient world, where divorced women often faced severe economic hardship and social ostracization. It's like having a built-in financial safety net for your marriage, ensuring that even if things go south, you won't end up on the street. Another light joke. You know, I bet ancient Egyptian divorce lawyers had a very simple job. So, you want a divorce? Did you sign the contract?
Yes?
Okay, here's your dowry back, and here's your share of the pots.
Next, no messy custody battles over the pet crocodile. No arguments about who gets the pyramid.
Just a clean break. Though, I imagine the arguments over who gets the good clay pots were probably still legendary, even if legally straightforward. The social implications of divorce were also surprisingly minimal. There was no social stigma attached to being divorced, for either men or women.
Divorced individuals could remarry freely, and their social standing was not diminished. This contrasts sharply with many other cultures, both ancient and modern,
where divorce can carry a heavy social burden, particularly for women. This acceptance of divorce as a normal part of life reflects a pragmatic society that valued individual well-being and the ability to form new, more successful partnerships.
It was a society that understood that sometimes it's better to cut
your losses and move on, rather than forcing unhappy couples to remain together. This ease of divorce also highlights the secular nature of Egyptian marriage, which we discussed earlier. Since marriage was not a religious sacrament, its dissolution did not require religious intervention or carry religious penalties.
It was a civil contract, and like any contract, it could be dissolved by mutual agreement or by the petition of
one party, as long as the terms were met.
This practical approach allowed for a flexibility that was unique in the ancient world, giving individuals more agency over their marital lives.
It's a far cry from societies where religious dogma dictated the permanence of marriage, regardless of the happiness of the individuals involved. What is as you observe the relatively calm dissolution of an ancient Egyptian marriage, you realize
that their approach to divorce was as progressive as their approach to women's rights within marriage. They understood that while marriage was a vital institution, it was also a human one, subject to change and sometimes to failure.
By providing a clear, fair, and accessible path to divorce, they ensured that individuals could move on with their lives without undue hardship or social condemnation.
It was a testament to a society that valued both stability and individual well-being, even when those values seemed to be in conflict.
And as the sun sets over the Nile, casting long shadows across the land, you're left with a profound appreciation for the practical wisdom of a people who understood that a good ending, even to a marriage, could be just as important as a good beginning. You've explored the surprisingly egalitarian and practical nature of marriage for the common Egyptian, where love and legal contracts intertwined. But now, let's ascend to the very pinnacle of Egyptian society, to the gilded palaces and sacred
temples, and delve into the world of royal unions.
Here, marriage was far more than a personal affair. It was a matter of divine kingship, political stability, and the very destiny of Egypt itself. You're about to discover that for pharaohs, weddings were less about romance and more about maintaining cosmic order, even if it meant some truly eyebrow-raising family dynamics. Imagine the grandeur of a royal palace in Thebes. The air is thick with incense, and the walls are adorned with vibrant frescoes depicting gods and pharaohs.
A young pharaoh, perhaps still in his teens, is about to take a bride.
But this isn't just any bride.
It might be his sister, or even his half-sister.
This practice, known as royal incest, might shock your modern sensibilities, but for the ancient Egyptians,
It was deeply rooted in their religious beliefs and political ideology. The pharaoh was considered a living god, a direct descendant of
the sun god Awe, and his lineage had to remain pure, untainted by common blood.
Marrying within the immediate family was seen as a way to preserve this divine purity, to emulate the gods themselves, who often married their siblings. Think Osiris
and Isis.
It's like a family business, but the business is ruling an empire, and the family tree is more of a family circle.
And the stakes are, quite literally, divine, mainstream historical fact. Royal incest, particularly brother-sister marriages, was a common practice among ancient Egyptian pharaohs. This was not for procreation within the general population, but
was primarily a religious and political strategy to maintain the purity of the divine royal bloodline, emulate the gods such as Osiris and Isis, and consolidate power within the ruling family. These unions were seen as essential for the stability and legitimacy of the pharaoh's rule. One quirky tidbit about these royal unions is that while the pharaoh might have a great royal wife, often his sister or half-sister, who held immense religious and political power, he could also have numerous secondary wives and concubines. These additional marriages were often strategic, designed to forge alliances with foreign powers or to reward loyal officials. So, while the great royal wife was the primary queen, the royal harem was a complex web of political maneuvering and diplomatic relations. It's like a very elaborate game of chess, where the pawns are princesses and the queen is, well, the
queen.
And everyone's trying to get their piece into the most advantageous position.
Imagine the family dinners.
So, how was your day, dear? Did you conquer any new lands?
And did that Hittite princess stop complaining about the desert heat? Historians still argue whether the practice of royal incest was primarily driven
by religious dogma or by pragmatic political considerations.
Some scholars emphasize the religious aspect, arguing that the pharaoh's divinity necessitated a pure lineage, mirroring the divine pantheon.
Others contend that the political benefits consolidating power, preventing rival claims to the throne, and keeping wealth within the family were the primary motivators. It's a bit like debating whether a politician's actions are driven by their deeply held beliefs or by their desire to win the next election. The truth, as often is the case, is likely a complex interplay of both, with religious ideology providing the justification for political expediency. These royal marriages were often grand affairs, unlike the simple cohabitation of commoners. While there might not have been a single wedding ceremony in the modern sense, the events surrounding a royal union would have been highly ceremonial, involving elaborate processions, religious rituals, and public displays of wealth and
power. The purpose was to reinforce the pharaoh's divine status and the legitimacy of his rule.
The queen, as the great royal wife, played a crucial role in these rituals, often depicted alongside the pharaoh in temples and monuments, emphasizing her role as a divine consort and a symbol of fertility and continuity. It was a spectacle designed
to awe and inspire, a living embodiment of the cosmic order. Another light joke. You know, I bet royal family gatherings in ancient Egypt were a little awkward. So, Uncle Akhenaten, still trying to convince everyone there's only one god.
And cousin Tutankhamun, how's that leg?
Heard you fell off a chariot. Again. And then someone would inevitably bring up the family tree, and everyone would just stare at their papyrus scrolls, pretending to be very interested in the latest tax reforms.
Because when your family tree is more of a family bush, it's best not to ask too many questions. Beyond the internal dynamics, royal marriages were also a vital tool in foreign policy.
Pharaohs would often take foreign princesses as wives, not for love, but to seal diplomatic alliances and ensure peace with neighboring kingdoms. These were known as diplomatic marriages, and they were a crucial part of maintaining Egypt's
power and influence in the ancient world. Imagine a young princess, far from her homeland, suddenly thrust into the opulent but alien world of the Egyptian court, her sole purpose to solidify a treaty.
It was a heavy burden, but one that could bring immense benefits to her people.
It's like a very high-stakes arranged marriage, where the dowry is an entire kingdom. The religious significance of royal marriages cannot be overstated.
The pharaoh's union with his great royal wife was seen as a terrestrial reflection of the divine marriages of the gods.
Their fertility was believed to ensure the fertility of the land and the prosperity of Egypt. The queen, in particular, was often associated
with goddesses like Hathor, the goddess of love, beauty, and motherhood, further cementing her sacred role. This intertwining of the political, the personal, and the divine made royal marriages a cornerstone of the Egyptian worldview, a sacred act that ensured the well-being of the entire nation. So, as you observe the intricate dance of power, religion, and family in the pharaonic court, you realize that royal unions in ancient Egypt were a world apart from the marriages of commoners. They were complex tapestries woven from divine decree, political necessity, and the enduring belief in the sacred nature of the pharaoh. It was a system designed to maintain order, ensure continuity, and reflect the cosmic harmony that the Egyptians so deeply revered. And as the sun sets over the majestic temples, casting long shadows across the land, you're left with a profound appreciation for the unique complexities of a society where even love and marriage were, at their highest levels, a matter of divine and imperial destiny. You've navigated the intricate world of royal unions and the surprising ease of divorce in ancient Egypt. Now, let's turn our attention to a fundamental aspect of marriage in any society, but one that held particular significance for the Egyptians: procreation. For them, marriage was not just about companionship or economic stability. It was deeply intertwined with the continuation of the family line, the well-being of the community, and even the cosmic order. You're about to discover the ancient practices and beliefs surrounding fertility and how the desire for children shaped marital life in the land of the pharaohs. Imagine a young couple, newly married, their thoughts turning to the future. In ancient Egypt, the primary purpose of marriage was to have children, especially sons, who could continue the family name, inherit property, and ensure the proper rituals were performed for their parents in the afterlife. This wasn't just a societal expectation. It was a deeply ingrained cultural and religious imperative. A childless marriage, while not necessarily grounds for divorce, would have been a source of considerable anxiety and disappointment. You might see couples making offerings at temples, praying to deities associated with fertility, or seeking out magical remedies to encourage conception. It's like the ultimate family pressure, but with the added weight of ensuring your soul's journey through the afterlife. No pressure, right? Mainstream historical fact: in ancient Egypt, procreation was considered a primary purpose of marriage, essential for the continuation of the family line and the performance of funerary rituals. The desire for children, particularly sons, was deeply ingrained in their culture, leading couples to seek divine intervention, medical remedies, and magical practices to ensure fertility and successful childbirth. One quirky tidbit about ancient Egyptian fertility practices involves the use of rather unusual diagnostic tests for pregnancy. Ancient papyri describe methods such as having a woman urinate on barley and wheat seeds. If the barley grew, it was believed to indicate a male child. If the wheat grew, a female. If neither grew, she was not pregnant. While scientifically unsound, this practice highlights the intense desire for knowledge about conception and gender, and the lengths to which people would go to predict and influence these outcomes. It's like an ancient gender reveal party, but with more seeds and less confetti. And probably a lot more waiting. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on procreation in ancient Egyptian marriages diminished the importance of romantic love or companionship. Some scholars suggest that the societal pressure to have children meant that practical considerations often overshadowed emotional bonds. Others contend that while procreation was a vital function, it did not preclude deep affection and partnership within marriage, and that couples often found love and fulfillment within the framework of their societal roles. It's a bit like debating whether a couple who marries for financial stability can still find true love. The truth is likely a complex interplay, with both practical and emotional aspects contributing to the overall marital experience. Beyond the initial conception, the Egyptians also had a rich array of beliefs and practices surrounding pregnancy and childbirth. Pregnant women would wear amulets and charms to protect themselves and their unborn children from evil spirits. They would consult with midwives and healers, who offered advice and remedies. Childbirth itself was often a communal event, with women laboring in special birthing houses or on birthing bricks, supported by female relatives and midwives. The goddess Hathor, often depicted with cow horns, was a particularly important deity for women in childbirth, invoked for her protective and nurturing qualities. It's like a very ancient, very spiritual birthing class, but with more goddesses and less lames. Another light joke. You know,
I bet ancient Egyptian parents had a special phrase for when their kids were being particularly noisy.
Probably something
Like, by the beard of Osiris, these little blessings are louder than a herd of hippos. And then they'd probably just sigh and offer another prayer to Hathor for patience. Because some things, like noisy children, are truly timeless. The desire for children also extended into the afterlife. Egyptians believed that children were essential for performing the necessary funerary rituals and making offerings to the deceased, ensuring their continued existence in the afterlife.
a childless couple might adopt children to fulfill this vital role, highlighting the importance of lineage beyond biological ties.
This belief system underscored the profound connection between marriage, family, and the eternal journey of the
soul, making procreation not just a personal desire, but a cosmic responsibility. Fertility rituals were not just for women.
Men also participated.
In some instances, men would seek remedies for infertility or make offerings to ensure their virility. The god Min, often depicted with an erect phallus, was a deity associated with male fertility and was invoked by those seeking to father children. This shared responsibility for procreation further emphasizes the partnership aspect of Egyptian marriage, where both husband and wife played active roles in ensuring the continuation of their family line. It was a joint venture, a shared hope for the future daughters. As you observe the ancient Egyptians' deep-seated desire for children, and the various rituals and beliefs they employed to ensure fertility, you realize that procreation was far more
than just a biological process. It was a spiritual quest, a societal obligation, and a profound expression of hope for the future. Their marital lives were shaped by this fundamental drive, leading to practices that might seem strange to us, but were deeply meaningful to them. And as the sun sets over the fertile lands of Egypt, you're left with a profound appreciation for the timeless human desire to create, to nurture, and to leave a legacy that stretches far beyond a single lifetime. You've explored the practicalities
of Egyptian marriage, from contracts to cohabitation, and even the divine complexities of royal unions.
But what about the heart's desires that couldn't be solved by a papyrus scroll or a royal decree? What if love wasn't quite blossoming as hoped, or a certain someone needed a little nudge in your direction?
This is where the fascinating, and sometimes wonderfully weird, world of ancient Egyptian magic entered the romantic arena.
You're about to discover the magical side of Egyptian romance, where amulets, spells, and even love potions were part
of the pursuit of affection. Imagine you're a young Egyptian, perhaps smitten with someone who seems oblivious to your charms.
You wouldn't just sigh dramatically. You might seek out a practitioner of Heka, the ancient Egyptian word for magic. This wasn't dark, forbidden sorcery, but a recognized and often integrated part of daily life, used for everything from healing to protection, and yes, to influence matters of the heart.
You might commission a love charm, an amulet inscribed with powerful symbols or deities designed to attract affection.
Or perhaps you'd acquire a papyrus scroll with a love spell, carefully written to compel the object of your desire to notice you, to yearn for you, to fall madly in love. It's like an ancient version of a dating app, but with significantly more mystical intervention and a lot less swiping.
And probably a higher success rate, if you believed hard enough mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptians widely practiced magic Heka as an integral part of their daily lives, including the use of love charms, amulets, and spells to influence romantic relationships.
These magical practices were often recorded on papyri or inscribed on objects, demonstrating a belief in their efficacy to attract a desired partner, strengthen affection, or even compel love. One quirky tidbit about these love spells is their
often explicit and sometimes aggressive nature.
Some spells were designed not just to attract, but to compel a person to fall into an erotic madness, to lust uncontrollably for the spellcaster. Imagine reading a spell that basically says, "May so and so burn with desire for me. May they find no rest until they are in my arms."
It's a far cry from a subtle wink across the room.
These spells often invoked powerful deities or spirits, and sometimes involved rather unusual ingredients or rituals, like burning incense while reciting incantations or drawing specific symbols. It's like a very intense, very ancient version of a romantic comedy, but with more actual magic and potentially less consent.
Though, to be fair, the ethical considerations of ancient magic are, shall we say, debatable. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of love magic in ancient Egypt indicates a lack of personal agency in romantic relationships, or if it was simply another tool used by individuals to navigate the complexities of love and desire in a highly structured society. Some scholars suggest that reliance on magic implies a fatalistic view of love, where external forces were believed to dictate outcomes. Others contend that it was an expression of individual will and a way for people to feel empowered in their
pursuit of affection, especially when social norms or family expectations might have limited their direct actions.
It's a bit like debating whether using a dating coach means you're bad at dating, or if you're just smart about getting help. The truth is likely a complex blend, with magic offering a sense of control in an often unpredictable world beyond
spells and amulets. There's also evidence of ancient Egyptian love potions.
While the exact recipes are often lost to time or shrouded in mystical language, these concoctions were believed to stir passion, enhance beauty, or ensure fidelity.
Imagine a young woman brewing a special tea, perhaps infused with herbs known for their aphrodisiac qualities, or a man secretly adding a drop of a magical liquid to his beloved's drink. These weren't just old wives' tales.
They were serious attempts to harness the unseen forces of the universe for personal romantic gain. It's like a very ancient, very potent version of a romantic cocktail, but with significantly more mystical intent and potentially questionable side effects.
Probably best not to try these at home. Another light joke. I bet ancient Egyptian pharmacists had a very interesting inventory. Yes, we have remedies for headaches, broken bones, and crocodile bites.
And over here,
in the back, we have our special section for make him notice me potions and stop him from looking at that other girl charms.
Cash only, no questions act. It certainly adds a new dimension to the phrase love is a drug, doesn't it? The use of magic in love was not limited to attracting a partner. It was also employed to ensure fidelity and to prevent rivals.
Spells could be cast to bind a lover to you, or to cause a rival to lose interest or become unattractive.
This highlights the anxieties and insecurities that have always been a part of human relationships, regardless of the era. The Egyptians, like us, worried about infidelity, about losing the one they loved, and about the competition that inevitably arises in the pursuit of affection. Magic offered a perceived solution, a way to tip the scales in their favor, or at
least to feel like they were doing something to protect their hearts. This magical dimension of love also extended to the realm of dreams. Egyptians believed that dreams could be a conduit for divine messages and a means of influencing reality.
Some love spells involved rituals performed before sleep, with the intention of appearing in the beloved's dreams, or causing them to dream of the spellcaster.
It's like an ancient form of subconscious advertising, but instead of selling toothpaste, you're selling yourself.
And probably a lot more effective than a late-night infomercial.so, as you delve into the mystical undercurrents of ancient Egyptian romance. You realize that their approach to love was far more multifaceted than a simple legal contract.
It was a blend of practicality, passion, and a deep belief in the power of the unseen.
Magic offered a way to influence the unpredictable currents of the heart, to attract, to bind, and to protect.
And as the sun sets over the desert, casting long shadows across the land, you're left with a profound appreciation for the timeless human desire for connection and the wonderfully imaginative ways in which ancient Egyptians sought to achieve
it, even if it meant a little bit of magical mischief. You've delved into the magical side of Egyptian romance, where spells and charms offered a mystical helping hand in matters of the heart. But for the ancient Egyptians, love and partnership extended far beyond the fleeting moments of earthly life. Their profound belief in the afterlife meant that marriage was not just a temporary earthly arrangement, but a bond intended to endure for eternity. You're about to discover how couples prepared to continue their union in the realm of the dead, and how shared tombs became the ultimate testament to their enduring affection. Imagine yourself standing before a tomb, not just any tomb, but one clearly designed for two. The walls are adorned with vibrant paintings depicting a husband and wife, holding hands, sharing meals, playing games, and enjoying the simple pleasures of life together.
This isn't just a memorial.
It's a blueprint for their eternal existence.
For the ancient Egyptians, the afterlife was not some ethereal, disembodied state, but a direct continuation of their earthly lives, albeit in a perfected form.
If you were married and happy in this life, why wouldn't you want to continue that partnership in the next? It's like planning the ultimate never-ending vacation with your favorite person, but with significantly more mummification involved, and probably less sand in your sandals. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptians believed that marriage was a bond that could extend into the afterlife, and couples often planned to be buried together in shared tombs to ensure their continued companionship and partnership in the eternal realm. The afterlife was envisioned as a perfected version of earthly existence, making the presence of one spouse crucial for a complete and joyful eternity. One quirky tidbit about these shared tombs is the meticulous detail with which daily life was depicted. It wasn't just about grand religious scenes. It was about the mundane, the intimate, the everyday moments that made up their lives together. You'd see scenes of them harvesting crops, fishing in the Nile, enjoying music, or even just sitting quietly together. These depictions were not merely decorative. They were believed to magically ensure that these activities and relationships would continue in the afterlife. It's like creating a super detailed magical photo album of your life together, designed to manifest your eternal happiness. And probably a lot more effective than a Facebook album for preserving memories. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of shared tombs and the emphasis on marital continuity in the afterlife primarily reflected a genuine belief in eternal love, or if it was also a practical consideration for ensuring proper funerary rites and mutual support in the complex journey through the underworld. Some scholars suggest that the desire for eternal companionship was a deeply held emotional and spiritual belief. Others contend that the practical benefits of having a partner to assist with offerings and navigate the dangers of the afterlife were equally, if not more, important. It's a bit like debating whether you want your partner with you on a long road trip because you love their company, or because they're good at reading maps and changing tires. The truth is likely a blend, with both emotional and practical motivations driving their preparations for eternity. The preparation for the afterlife was a lifelong endeavor, and for married couples, it was a shared project. They would acquire funerary goods together, commission their tomb, and ensure that their names and images were prominently displayed, often holding hands or with arms around each other. This wasn't just about individual salvation. It was about a joint journey into eternity. The wife's presence in the tomb was just as important as the husband's, reflecting the egalitarian nature of their earthly unions. It's like planning your retirement, but instead of a beach house, you're building an eternal mansion, and instead of a 401,000, you're investing in magical spells and offerings. Another light joke. You know, I bet some ancient Egyptian couples had arguments about tomb decorations. Honey, I told you, no more scarab beetles. We have enough. And do we really need another depiction of you fishing? Can't we have one of me, you know, doing something glamorous, like applying coal? And then the husband would probably just sigh and say, yes, dear, right after I finish this eternal fishing trip. Because some marital debates, like the one about home decor, truly transcend time and space. The god Osiris, the ruler of the underworld, and the god of resurrection, was particularly important for married couples. His story with his wife Isis, who resurrected him after his murder, served as a powerful archetype for marital devotion and the triumph over death. Couples would often invoke Osiris and Isis in their funerary texts, hoping to emulate their eternal bond and ensure their own resurrection and reunion in the afterlife. It was a divine blueprint for eternal love, a cosmic guarantee that death was not the end of their partnership. This belief in marital continuity in the afterlife also meant that the deceased spouse was not forgotten. The living partner would continue to make offerings at the tomb, ensuring the well-being of their beloved in the underworld. This ongoing connection highlights the deep emotional bonds that existed between spouses, extending even beyond the veil of death. It was a testament to a love that transcended mortality, a promise of reunion in a world beyond this one. It's like a very long-distance relationship, but the distance is between life and death, and the communication is through offerings and prayers. As you contemplate the ancient Egyptians' profound belief in eternal marriage, you realize that their approach to love was truly holistic, encompassing not just this life, but the vast expanse of eternity. Their shared tombs were not just burial places, they were eternal homes, meticulously prepared for a continuation of the partnership they cherished. It was a testament to a culture that understood that true love knows no bounds, not even the ultimate boundary of death. And as the sun sets over the ancient necropolis, casting long shadows across the silent tombs,
you're left with a profound
appreciation for the enduring power of love, a power that, for the Egyptians,
truly lasted forever. You've seen how deeply intertwined marriage was with the afterlife, a bond meant to last for eternity.
Now, let's pull back from the cosmic and return to the very human question of how these unions actually came about.
In a society so focused on family, lineage, and practicality, how much say did an individual Egyptian actually have in choosing their life partner?
You're about to explore the delicate balance between personal choice and family influence in ancient Egyptian marriages, a dynamic that was far more nuanced than a simple arranged marriage. Imagine a young man or woman reaching the age when marriage becomes a consideration, while the idea of a love match was certainly present, as evidenced by the passionate love poetry we discussed earlier. The decision of who to marry was rarely, if ever, solely an individual one.
Family played a significant role, often initiating discussions and negotiations with other families.
This wasn't necessarily a forced union, but a guided one, where the wisdom and experience of elders helped navigate the complexities of social standing, economic compatibility, and the continuation of the family line.
It's like having a very
Involved, very opinionated, but ultimately well-meaning matchmaker in your corner.
and probably a lot less awkward than a blind date set up by your aunt. Mainstream historical fact. While personal affection and choice were recognized and valued in ancient Egypt, marriages were often influenced, if not outright arranged, by families. These arrangements were primarily driven by practical considerations,
such as maintaining social status, consolidating wealth, and ensuring the continuation of the family line, rather than purely romantic ideals. However, the consent of the individuals involved was generally sought, and forced marriages were rare. One quirky tidbit about this family influence is that it wasn't always about marrying someone from a completely different family.
sometimes to keep wealth and property within the family. Marriages between cousins, or even half-siblings, especially in the royal family, as we saw, were common.
This wasn't considered incestuous in the same way it might be viewed today, but a pragmatic way to maintain family cohesion and economic stability. Imagine your family reunion turning into a potential dating pool. It certainly simplifies the meeting the parents stage, doesn't it? Though, I imagine the holiday dinners could get a little confusing with all the overlapping family trees. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of family-influenced marriages in ancient Egypt diminished the overall happiness or emotional fulfillment of individuals within these unions. Some scholars suggest that the emphasis on practical considerations might have led to less passionate, more utilitarian relationships. Others contend that love and affection often grew within these arranged partnerships, and that the stability and security provided by family support contributed to long-term marital satisfaction.
It's a bit like debating whether a marriage that starts with a strong foundation of friendship and shared values is more likely to last than one based solely on initial passionate attraction.
The truth is likely a complex interplay, with both personal feelings and family expectations shaping the outcome. Despite the family's strong influence, the individual's consent was generally considered important. While a young person might
be encouraged or even pressured towards a particular match, outright forced marriages were rare and generally frowned upon.
Love poems and personal letters suggest that individuals did have preferences and could express them. If a proposed match was truly undesirable, it was possible to refuse, though this might require considerable courage and potentially lead to family disapproval. It's like having a veto power, but using it might mean a very awkward silence at the dinner table for a few months, and maybe a few less gifts at the next festival. Another light joke. You know, I bet ancient Egyptian parents had a very specific way of subtly hinting at a potential match.
Probably something like, "Oh, look, our neighbor's son, Hori, just got a new donkey.
And he's so good at plowing fields, and he has all his teeth. What a catch!" And then the child would just nod politely, while secretly hoping for someone who could write better love poetry. Because even in ancient Egypt, sometimes you just wanted a little sparkle. The process of finding a spouse often involved a network of family, friends, and even professional matchmakers. These individuals would act as intermediaries, sounding out potential partners and their families, discreetly assessing compatibility and suitability.
It was a far cry from the modern concept of dating, where individuals meet and decide for themselves.
Instead, it was a communal effort, a collective investment in the future of the family and the community.
It's like a very efficient, Very ancient version of LinkedIn, but for finding a spouse instead of a job.
And probably with less awkward headshots, this balance between personal choice and family influence also varied across different social strata.
For the elite and royal families, marriages were often highly strategic, designed to consolidate power, forge alliances, or maintain the purity of the royal bloodline, as we saw with the pharaohs.
For commoners, while practical considerations,
Like land and resources were important, there was likely more room for personal preference, especially as they aged and gained more independence. It was a spectrum, not a rigid rule, with individual circumstances and family dynamics playing a significant role in how much agency a person had in choosing their partner. As you reflect on the intricate dance between personal desire and
familial expectation in ancient Egyptian marriages, you realize that it was a system designed for stability and continuity, but one that also allowed for the blossoming of genuine affection. It wasn't a world of forced unions, but one where guidance and support from family was seen as essential for a successful partnership.
And as the sun sets over the ancient land, casting long shadows across the homes of families, you're left with a profound appreciation for the enduring human quest for connection. A quest that, even in ancient times, found its way through the complex web of social norms and personal desires. You've explored the practicalities, the legalities, and
even the magical undercurrents of ancient Egyptian marriage.
now, let's elevate our gaze to the heavens and understand the profound influence of the divine on matters of the heart and home.
Fourth, ancient Egyptians. The gods were not distant, abstract entities. They were intimately involved in every
aspect of life, including love, marriage, and domestic bliss.
You're about to discover how deities like Hathor, Bes, and Torit shaped their understanding of partnership and family, infusing everyday unions with sacred meaning. Imagine a newly
married couple, perhaps making an offering at a local shrine. Their prayers aren't just for prosperity or good health. They're specifically for a harmonious marriage, for fertile offspring, and for the blessings of the gods upon their home.
At the forefront of these divine influences was Hathor, the multifaceted goddess often depicted as a cow or a woman with
cow horns and a sun disk.
She was the goddess of love, beauty, music, dance, joy, and motherhood.
Her temples were vibrant centers of celebration, and she was invoked by lovers, wives, and those seeking to conceive. Her presence was believed to bring happiness and fertility to a marriage, making her the ultimate divine matchmaker and guardian of domestic bliss. It's like having a celestial wedding planner who also happens to be the goddess of good times
and baby showers.
Pretty convenient, right? Mainstream historical fact. Hathor was one of the most revered deities in ancient Egypt, widely associated with love, beauty, fertility, and motherhood. Her influence extended to marriage and domestic life, with couples often invoking her blessings for a harmonious union and successful procreation.
She was frequently depicted in funerary contexts, guiding the deceased to the afterlife, further emphasizing her role in all stages of life and beyond. One quirky tidbit about Hathor is her occasional depiction as a fierce lioness, particularly in her role as the Eye of Eye, a destructive aspect sent to punish humanity. This duality from nurturing goddess of love to vengeful destroyer highlights the complex nature of Egyptian deities, and perhaps the unpredictable nature of love itself.
Imagine praying to the goddess of love, only to realize she also has a temper. It's like finding out your favorite romantic comedy star is also a black belt in martial arts. Keeps you on your toes, doesn't it?
Historians still argue whether the widespread veneration of deities like Hathor in matters of marriage and fertility primarily reflected a genuine spiritual belief in divine intervention, or if it also served as a cultural mechanism to reinforce
societal norms and expectations regarding family and procreation.
Some scholars suggest that the religious practices were deeply held expressions of faith, with individuals genuinely believing in the god's ability to influence their personal
lives.
Others contend that the divine framework provided a powerful justification for societal structures, encouraging adherence to traditional marital roles and the importance of having children.
It's a bit like debating whether people go to church because they believe in God, or because it's a good way to meet people and maintain social standing.
The truth is likely a complex interplay, with both spiritual conviction and social utility playing a role. Beyond Hathor, other deities also
played a role in the sacred tapestry of Egyptian marriage.
Bes, A dwarf god with a grotesque but benevolent appearance was the protector of households, women, and childbirth.
His image was often found in homes, on beds, and on cosmetic items, warding off evil spirits and bringing good fortune.
Taurit, a hippopotamus goddess, was another powerful protector of pregnant women and childbirth. Her formidable appearance meant to scare away malevolent forces.
These household gods provided a sense of divine protection and comfort, ensuring that the domestic sphere was safe and blessed. It's like having a divine security system for your home, but instead of cameras, you have a dancing dwarf and a friendly hippo.
Much more charming, wouldn't you agree?
Another light joke. You know, I bet ancient Egyptian couples had a very specific prayer for when their kids were acting up.
Oh, BS please. Just 5 minutes of quiet.
And Taurit, bless this child, with the ability to sleep through the night, for the love of I.
And then they'd probably just sigh and offer another prayer to Hathor for patience.
Because some things, like unruly children, are truly timeless, and sometimes you just need divine intervention. The influence of the gods extended to the very language of love and marriage.
Love poems often invoke deities, comparing the beloved
to a goddess or asking for divine blessings upon a union. The concept of Mart, the cosmic principle of truth, justice, and balance, also played a subtle but significant role. A harmonious marriage was seen as an embodiment of Mart, reflecting the divine order of the universe.
This meant that a
good marriage was not just personally fulfilling, but also contributed to the overall well-being and stability of the cosmos.
It's a far cry from just finding someone who tolerates your bad jokes.
This was about aligning your personal life
with the very fabric of reality. Religious festivals and rituals also provided opportunities for couples to seek divine favor for their marriages. Processions, offerings, and participation in temple rites were common ways to honor the gods and ask for their continued blessings.
These communal acts of worship reinforced the sacred dimension of marriage, reminding individuals that their personal unions were part of a larger divine plan. It was a constant reaffirmation of faith, a way to keep the gods close to their hearts and homes. As you contemplate the pervasive presence of the gods in ancient Egyptian marital life, you realize that their understanding of love and partnership
was deeply spiritual.
It wasn't just a human contract, it was a divine blessing, a reflection of cosmic order, and a journey guided by benevolent deities.
The gods were not just observers, they were active participants, influencing every aspect of courtship, marriage, and family life.
And as the sun sets over the ancient temples, casting long shadows across the land, you're left with a profound
appreciation for the sacred dimension of love, a dimension that, for the Egyptians, truly connected heaven and earth. You've journeyed through the intricate world of ancient Egyptian weddings, from the practicalities of contracts to the divine blessings of Hathor, and even the surprising ease of divorce.
Now, as our exploration of love in the land of the pharaohs draws to a close, let's consider the enduring legacy of these ancient customs. How did the unique marital traditions of ancient Egypt subtly shape later traditions, and how do they resonate with our modern views on love, partnership, and family? You're about to discover that the echoes of the Nile's ancient unions still ripple through the currents of time, influencing our understanding of commitment in ways you might
not expect. Imagine looking at a modern wedding, perhaps a civil ceremony, and seeing faint reflections of ancient Egyptian practices.
While no direct, unbroken line of tradition exists, the emphasis on marriage as a civil contract, rather than solely a religious sacrament, finds a surprising parallel in ancient Egypt. Their focus on legal agreements, property rights, and the financial protection of both spouses laid a groundwork that, in some ways, predates and even informs later legal systems. It's like seeing the very first blueprint for a house, and then recognizing elements of it in every home built since. The Egyptians, in their pragmatism, were pioneers in defining marriage as a legally binding partnership, a concept that continues to evolve but remains fundamental today. Mainstream historical fact, while direct lineal descent is complex, the
ancient Egyptian emphasis on marriage as a civil contract, with detailed legal provisions for property rights and divorce, significantly influenced later legal traditions in the Mediterranean world, particularly Roman law, which in turn shaped
many modern legal systems.
This focus on secular legal agreements for marriage was a distinct feature that set them apart from many contemporary cultures. One quirky tidbit about this legacy is how the ancient Egyptian concept of women's legal equality within marriage, particularly their right to own and manage property independently, stands in stark contrast to many later societies, including those in Europe until relatively recently.
For centuries, women in many cultures lost their legal identity and property rights upon marriage.
The Egyptian model, where a wife retained her assets and could act independently, was remarkably progressive and, in some ways, more aligned with modern feminist ideals than with the patriarchal norms that dominated much of subsequent history.
It's like they had a secret time machine and got a sneak peek at the 21st century, then decided to implement some of its best ideas thousands of years early.
Very forward-thinking, wouldn't you agree? Historians still argue whether the apparent
lack of a grand public wedding ceremony in ancient Egypt contributed to its legalistic approach to marriage, or if the legal framework simply evolved to support a pre-existing cultural preference for private unions.
Some scholars suggest that because there was no religious or state-mandated ritual, the civil contract became the primary means of formalization. Others contend that the Egyptian emphasis on practicality and individual rights naturally led to a legal system that protected both parties, making elaborate ceremonies less necessary.
It's a bit like debating whether the chicken or the egg came first, but in this case, the chicken is a papyrus scroll and the egg is a happy couple. The truth is likely a symbiotic relationship, where cultural values and legal structures mutually reinforced each other. The Egyptian emphasis on companionship and mutual affection within marriage, as evidenced by their love poetry and the affectionate
term spouses used for each other, also resonates with modern ideals of partnership. While arranged marriages and practical considerations were certainly present, the underlying value placed on emotional connection and shared life is a timeless theme. This blend of practicality and passion, where a marriage could be both a sensible arrangement and a source of deep personal fulfillment, offers a nuanced perspective that challenges simplistic notions of ancient relationships. It's a reminder that human hearts, regardless of the era, yearn for connection and understanding. Another light joke. You know, I bet if an ancient Egyptian couple somehow time-traveled to a modern wedding, they'd be utterly baffled by the white dress. Why is she wearing her burial shroud before she dies? And why is everyone so stressed? Just move your linen chests in, sign the papyrus, and let's get to the beer. They'd probably think we're all a bit dramatic.
And maybe they'd have a point. The legacy of ancient Egyptian marriage also extends to the concept of divorce.
The relative ease and lack of social stigma associated with divorce in Egypt provided a model for marital dissolution that was far more humane and equitable than in many other ancient and even some modern societies. This recognition that not all unions are meant to last forever, and that individuals deserve a fair and dignified exit, is a concept that has slowly gained traction throughout history. The Egyptians, in their wisdom, understood that forcing unhappy
couples to remain together could be more detrimental to society than allowing them to part ways amicably. It's like they invented the conscious uncoupling thousands of years before Gwyneth Paltrow. Finally, the profound belief in marital continuity in the afterlife, as evidenced by shared tombs and funerary practices, speaks to a deep human desire for eternal connection. While our modern societies may not share the same specific beliefs about the afterlife, the sentiment of wanting to be with loved ones beyond death is a universal one.
The Egyptian practice of preparing for an eternal partnership underscores the enduring power of love and the hope that true bonds transcend the boundaries of mortality. It's a beautiful, poignant reminder that some connections are simply meant to last forever, in this life and whatever comes next. As you reflect on the subtle yet significant ways in which ancient Egyptian marital customs have echoed through time, you realize that their approach to love, partnership, and family was remarkably sophisticated and, in many ways, ahead of its time. Their blend of practicality, legal foresight, gender equality, and a deep appreciation for both earthly and eternal bonds offers a rich tapestry of human experience.
And as the sun sets on our journey through the land of the pharaohs, you're left with a profound appreciation for the timeless wisdom of a civilization that understood that the essence of marriage lies not in fleeting ceremonies,
but in the enduring commitment of two souls, bound by contract, affection, and the hope of an eternal future. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As the last.
Echoes of the ancient Nile fade into the quiet of the night, and the distant whispers of pharaohs and queens become a gentle murmur. Allow your mind to drift.
The journey through ancient Egyptian weddings, with its surprising insights and timeless truths, has come to its peaceful conclusion.
You've seen how deeply woven love and partnership were into the very fabric of their lives, a thread connecting them to their families, their communities, and their hopes for eternity. Feel the warmth of the story settle around you, like a soft, comforting blanket. The world of the pharaohs, once so vibrant and alive, now gently recedes, leaving behind only the faintest scent of papyrus and distant desert breezes.
There's no need to rush, no need to worry about the morning's tasks or the next great discovery. Just let the images soften, the sounds quiet, and the thoughts slow.
You are safe, you are warm, and the echoes of history are now a lullaby, guiding you gently towards a peaceful slumber.
Rest now, knowing that even in the deepest past, there was always a place for connection, for understanding, and for the quiet joy of a shared life.
Let the ancient spirits of Egypt watch over you as you drift into the quiet depths of sleep. Sweet dreams, my friend, sweet dreams.